Hi, um, this video is gonna be more about thinking in terms of first principles, which is not gonna be more about this book in general, though I'm gonna use it for the sake of presentation reasons. And this is also going to be about what I think about certain aspects of physics and how mathematics is, or specifically Euclidean elemental thinking has something to do with metaphysics, geometry, math, and of course physics. Did I say physics or metaphysics? Whatever. Well, anyways, I've this page, my thesis page, learning page. I have mind, void, illumination, location, point, other point, magnitude, line as these two parts of these two figures represents. Though you don't see the mind, you don't see the void or the illumination. The mind is the subject that perceives platonic forms. So the void is more of the mind looking upwards towards the invisible one, in misappropriating or misunderstanding the one as, or looking towards the one as if it was nothing, and in the essence of the mind thinks of it as a void, which in another sense it's the mind without any other forms and whatever sees the shadow of the one, but that shadow is more of an absence of illumination, but it's not the absence of the essence of light. So anyways, the void gets the mind to seek after illumination, to distinguish and to come to an understanding of the forms, and being able to distinguish it from the void within the mind. So this illumination is more of a geometric one because there's no colors in geometry actually. All that these figures, they're not actually what they are, in a sense that they don't have actual dimensionality of what we usually call dimensionality in our current society, but they're rather representations of invisible distinctions of the Platonic form of location, which through the illumination you could see or distinguish the distinctions of location within the void of the mind, if that made sense. This mind is more of the intellective second hypostasis of the Platonian system, but without going too much further into that, let's move on to the concept of point, which is derived from location as a here. I didn't have here written down or anything, but without location there's no point, but point is dependent upon location, which from the point there's a other point, or a here and a not here, which this other point is set of the point, or in relation to the point, which is a distinction of a location. So anyways, through the point to the other point, a magnitude of a path between these, from the distinction of the form of location of here to not here as a magnitude, which the path drawn, so to speak, is of the shortest path actually, is the line, the straight line, though there's actually other kinds of lines, so it's not necessarily a straight line. Well, let's go to skip ahead here to get into this part, which these lines represent magnitude, which is used to derive a ratio of the magnitudinal nature of it, which if you use the equal ratios of magnitude, you get unit, which a unit multiplied, or multiples of the unit, becomes a type of natural number, which is known in a positive sense. So this is one of this. This is also one of this, which this is a multiple of the unit by 1. Can I get what I'm saying? So one of this is 1, 2 of this is 2. So it's a compounded fraction of a unit, or not fraction. Well, it is technically a fraction, but I mean like a ratio, because fraction implies deriving the quotient of the ratio, which is different from the ratio in it of itself. So anyways, moving on, then there's a ratio of numbers rather than ratio of magnitudes, which then there's incommensurable magnitudes, which then there's geometric constants that describes the form of the figures in its simplex form. So the diagonal of the square is the square root of 2. That is its geometric constant, which is square root of 2 to the ratio of the side of the square as 1. So there's a ratio of the square root of 2 to 1 rather than the measure of that magnitude of the quotient. So even though I put this here, it's because it's in relation to rational numbers that this is derived from, yet it also requires a geometric constant to make this make sense, or else it would just be another type of magnitude without any relation to numbers or the geometric constants, which is kind of why I made it into a circle. But this is more like composite forms, and this is more of a elemental, irreducible, well-defined concept of what something is. So keep that in mind when I talk about magnitude, because I'm gonna scroll down to, come on, show, not this page, okay, this page, which I have here in the in the light colors. Distance equals measured material magnitude over the same measured magnitude, which the same measured magnitude of the measured material magnitude. In the way I wrote this out is making this consequent or important than the antecedent, though the order doesn't really matter if you understood how you read from left to right or top to down or bottom to up or right to left or left to right or whatever. It just the way you read it is less of a priority than the essence of its simplicity versus its compounded nature. So this measured magnitude is less compounded than the measured material magnitude. Yet at the same time, it is also derived from the measure of that material magnitude as its same measured magnitude. So even though from a top-down sense the material is required for distance, at the same time magnitude of geometry comes before distance of physicality of the magnitude of the measured material, which this material is more of a placeholder for objective reality. So megathos is also magnitude, by the way, which through this proportion there's a unit of distance that is derived from it, and then using this unit of distance we could derive to time, which is an almost constant rate of the measured material motive distance, so this motion added now into time, to the same measured material distance. So this distance, this whatever value of the unit, the multiple of the unit, incommensurable or whatever, is used as the distance part, but this time using motion of it. So in other sense, without motion there's no way of deriving any further abstraction from distance by itself. So anyways, the motive material, the material in motion, or material motive distance, at an almost constant rate, because there's nothing truly perfectly knowable as a measure without using a derived measure from a material in motion. So it is almost constant rate. It's treated as if it was constant. So this is where relativity falls apart, because we presume that something is at a constant rate, and sometimes it's not constant rate. Sometimes it's slightly off, and the way we measure it depends on how those predictive models versus actual measured models represents. So people are stuck on trying to decipher perfect time understanding of certain motions, but all they're trying to do is find the perfect constant rate of something in physicality, which is fundamentally impossible. Anyways, using time derived from distance derived from magnitude, you use distance over time as speed, alright? And then from speed, you derive velocity. So from velocity, from velocity you get this part here, which is Ken Wheeler's famous diagram, though I have tweaked it to be adjusted to various things that he has said before, and in videos and in his visually in his books or articles and such. So okay, velocity has the change of distance over the change of time. However, there's negative and positive values in the change of the distance and the change of the time, which this distance term is more of a comparative term between two frames of references. Alright? Did you get that? Well, anyways, that those two frames of references, without at least two frames of references, there's no such thing actually as a instantaneous speed vector, which is only something that is derived as a composite of two frames of references. So vectorial vectors in general derived from velocity, derived from speed, derived from time, derived from distance, derived from magnitude. Alright? See where I'm going with this? There's many levels of abstractions going on here. So dielectricity is negative distance and negative time relative to a privileged frame of reference that is presumed as the universal clock or whatever. Relative to this, displacement towards something is negative or inward. In the word counterspatial, but it's more like internally. And this negative time is in reference to positive nature that is centrifugal. It's more centripetal time, but they're both illusions or abstraction illusions specifically, because this counter time or counters or negative time or positive time is still both going through actual physical time. All right, so there's a multiplicative, or not multiplicative, but more of an array derivative of speed, which arrays of the speed as the velocities interacting against each other in various composite states, interacting with other types of composite natures. So there's so electricity is counter spatial forward time, or convergent centrifugal, which, if you could really grasp that, you understand the field mechanics of electricity as a magnetodielectric byproduct. So magnetodielectric byproduct in this generation of magnetodielectric electricity, which there's this MDE, EDM, EMD, DMG, MGE, DGE. Those are just examples that Ken Weider has clearly stated in his magnetism third edition, but he never really gets into the other arch forms that could be derived from his interpretation of velocities against each other. So you could work this out on your own. Well, anyways, I have here as a zero-sum spatial temporal matrix, but it's more of an array, which there's a funny joke that mathematicians say that like so many things are actually an array of numbers, which of course everything is an array, from matrices to matrices as a symbol, which is what is imaginary numbers, so to speak, but they're not actually imaginary numbers, because it's more of a representation of a certain nature of an array of numbers. Anyways, if you figured this out, then you figured out what I meant by these things, because, or what Ken Reader actually is going, or not going to, but more like been, what kind of mode of thinking that he's been interacting with, since these are all distinctions of velocities. The center, which there is a net zero of, or zero displacement actually, since velocities and such doesn't care about the distance of what is actually traversed between two frames of references, but rather the complete it's more of a direct comparison between two frames of references in its totality that is presumed. So if you get what I'm saying, this ether would be more of a totality of the velocities of the field, of the physical field, which, even though it's physical, there's going to that nature explanation is more of a going to other parts of my book, which I don't know if you guys could handle it, but this is how I would lay out some of these things that in the Platonic and Neoplatonic systems, in relation to also Ken Weider's exegesis of the Platonic paradigm, to being consistent to itself, which means that I've gone further ahead than Ken Wheeler, basically. Even if you don't believe that, that's what I've done or exegeted metaphysically by myself of these things. Well, anyways, the unified one all one. These are okay. So this line above, all of this is more of dealing with wholes, WHOLES, and from here below is more dealing with parts as well as its composite nature. So unities give unity to the intellect or mind, as well as the magnitude. The way that Plotinus used megethos or magnitude, as well as not any other person, but more like the way Plotinus using magnitude is also kind of similar to the concept of a cause. Well, the cause that is towards generation in general, which from magnitude you could get matter in a sense through the various distinctions of the ideas in its limitless and consubstantiation, in its imitation, in its shape as an object. If you get what I'm saying, you're pretty much smarter than most other people that you know. So again, Ken Wheeler talks about the ether, but it's more over here. Yeah, at the same time, he neglects. Did I say that right? Neglect. There you go. He neglects. He neglects. Wow. Can't be talk right. He neglects this part of the pyramid, so to speak, as well as its emanations of distinctions, which there's a order of importance from top to bottom, left to right, black to gray. So you see all the grayer parts of this book. Well, they're less important and they're its own category. It could be seen as in its whole with the black letters as secondary to what is prior to it, though there is no prior to that after physis or corporeal reality, which is this part of this diagram, or this part of this. So anyways, when Kent talks about the ether, it's not really the soul. Even though it is the soul, it also isn't. Which getting to that thing is a whole mess in itself. Because there's also the undescended soul prior to its being within the world, or its becoming within the world. And there's also the ascent of the soul within the nous, and even further ascent of the nous as it leaves behind magnitude, or the form of magnitude, as it burns it away to as means for Janna or Jati, or how to say, it's over here somewhere. The created sacrificed or consumed in the fire to the uncreate, or Japeti, or to burn up, as means for Samadhi, or some adjoined realm of the realm of perfection and such, which getting to this is really hard in one sitting, and I probably wouldn't do it. Though, if you just really read this carefully, you could get most of Buddhism, but not. It's not a replacement for trying to understand what the text says and all that, but it's still, nevertheless, good enough. And much of this are terms that Kent Readers define, which I have compiled into one cheat sheet, so to speak. But everything in this book is all my art, so in that sense, it is copyrighted art, but not the concepts behind it. If you get what I'm saying, I'm not asking to be sued, basically, okay? I'm not trying to copy anyone, even though I have some stuff that is derived from other people's, like this. This part here is new, which, if you don't know of Gary Doskas, you should look him up. He's smarter than most people that talks about spherical geometry. And I should add more stuff to show how I made this part as well as this part, because they're off the sphere. But anyways, I'm going to before I leave, just show you what's in the current book that's online in my website. I change it often, and I'm still fixing it. This part is screwed up as an example of what I'm in the works of fixing. And before I end this, I should go over this page, which is kind of new and excuse me, important, because people really think that there is no way to understand things, which it's not a true understanding when you say that. Yeah, at the same time, it's kind of true that there's no way of understanding things if you rely on a paradigm that leads to circumduction, which is going around and about, talking about things around, beating around the bush, so to speak, but never getting to the bottom of the root of that bush. So there's an indeterminate concept, but it's not well defined. It's more of a concept before it is defined, which there's a reifiable concept, which, or an unverifiable concept. If it has unattributive definitions, there's unverifiable concept that is removed from a verifiable concept, as means for its further filtering of the concept as a verifiable to attributive definitions of it, which is remove the contradictions, or else it has a requirement of contradiction, which means it has unattributive definitions as some tier, which then goes up and goes back here. And there's a distinction between indeterminate and unverifiable, which, if it is unverifiable, you can't really talk about it to begin with. But indeterminate implies it could be verifiable, But unverifiable implies it's not verifiable. So in that sense, this is distinct from this. And there's, anyways, going back to the lower parts of this diagram, there's a contradiction removal of the definitions of the concept that's verifiable, which when those contradictions are removed, there's an untenable ideation of it that is realized, but it has no foundation in and of itself, which is why this part is not here. This, it's just a gap. It just falls out, so to speak. And so the removal of contradictions implies there's a knowable, untenable ideation realization, which implies there's a contradiction requirement, and so on and so forth. But I should say that it's not like this always has to have this, or this always has to have this, or anything like that, but there's somewhat permeable to each other. And of course, if there's no contradictions, there's an ideation realization. And getting this part is just gotta stare at it and you might get it. Let's just leave it as that. This part is my favorite because I pretty much understood what Charles Sanders Peirce actually meant by these four terms of induction, deduction, abduction, and retroduction, but there's also a wrong way of using retroduction, which turns into circumduction or periphrasion or something. It's like basically, as I said before, it's a roundabout logic. Just thinking about something in positive, or the negation of the positive, or the composite of that negation and the positive, or the neither, the retroduction of that abduction, deduction, and induction, which leads to what exactly? Which is where various other cults that believes in process philosophy or whatever, process ontology, tries to loop it together as if there is a cause to an uncause, when there is no how to say causative generation of the uncaused, though there is a sort of ascension or a hypernoetic unity conjoinment to the absolute. There's no actual descent of the absolute. Rather, there's only the emanation of the attribute of the absolute. There's no descent of the absolute. For if there was a descent of the absolute, there is a lessening of the absolute, which is impossible. So anyone who says that they believe in the all above the one actually contributes to their own demise in this circle of delusion, beingism, solipsism, fidelism, nihilism, non-beingism, materialism, meritism, perpetualism, and beingism again. So everything, when you screw it up, it will just loop all over back into each other in like these cycles or these cycles or these cycles or these cycles, and was having a major cycle here in both directions. And there's a unmoved or truly unmoved that only emanates distinctions, but they're not actually without a difference. So I'll get it more into this part in another video, but I just wanted to add it to this video because people might think that I'm just a mathematician or some kind of crank physicist or something, but I really spend my time think about these things, not for the money or whatever, even though I'm broke, just saying. I do enjoy understanding things for myself and mastering these things, and I do praise those that help me to understand things further, but at the same time they only go so far into helping me. And which is why this video helps, because I though even though it is partially for myself in explaining to you why I think these things, it's also more of a way of being helpful to others in what I'm trying to do, so that others don't have to fall for the types of delusions that plagued me, because I've answering them in a way that at least the very least made sense to me. For Ken Weider tries to deny space altogether, when really he uses a velocity diagram of sorts, which again, velocity is change of distance over change of time, though there's a positive or negative values for both the distance and the time. So that explains the so-called counter space and so-called counter time or anti-time or whatever. And also explains the four field modalities derived from distinctions of velocity terms in its various array form, in its composite effulgent manifestation of those distinctions of velocity of that is derived from speed, that's derived from time, that's derived from distance, that is derived from magnitude, though that magnitude is more of a means for the intellectual matter to descend into the realm of physical matter. Though again, why this is important is this dielectric nature of the field is not the true it's not the true rest, so to speak. And this ether is more of a composite of all of this, all of the velocity terms into itself, in relation to itself, which makes this ether more of a it's more of a whole of the nature of reality in its unity to the intellectual matter of the magnitude, which again, Ken Weider, however, tries to make the not here part of the second point of the line of the magnitude as magnetism, and tries to make the here, or the first point distinction of the location, as the dielectric point, which the circuit of that as electricity as a compound of these two he tries to make it as the right hand rule and all that, which, it's true, of course, but at the same time, you gotta think about what I'm trying to say here is that distinctions of velocity as negative space over negative time becomes dielectricity. That means dielectricity here is not actually truer than time or distance because they're derived from it. Get what I'm saying? Dielectricity is a compound of distinctions of vectors, of velocities of space, velocities of the speed, derived from time, derived from distance, derived from magnitude, derived from the concept of intellectual matter as the ether in its illumination. Which illumination is the extrinsic attribute of the one irradiates, or toma, or ananke, or aristos in its dyadic nature generates here, but at the same time it has these various steps that it has to go through, which Ken Reader tries to skip a whole lot of math to derive to such conclusions, which is where I am criticizing him for here, that he is neglecting the Euclidean primer behind geometries, or the nature of nature, which is a problem that Iambucus and Proclus had in trying to prioritizing number over geometry. When really, geometry begets number. Number does not beget geometry. Kind of get what I'm saying? That's pretty much the major flaw of Platonism or Pythagoreanism in worshipping the number over the form, the geometric form of it. So, point, line, circle, sphere, that paradigm doesn't really use numbers. They're distinctions of geometric constants, which, when well defined in its irreducible elemental state, you could derive unit from magnitudinal ratio from magnitude, or natural number from unit from magnitudinal ratio from magnitude. Kind of get what I'm saying? So this is a geometric constant. Alright? And if it is irreducibly derived, it is also an element of it. But people think this. But again, you need to realize that all math relies on the Platonic form of the concept of location and its distinctions as point and other point and such, which are prior to the posterior of the nature of numbers, or I don't know the term in French. Pardon my French, or was it Latin? I don't know. I hope this video made some sense to you, for those who are watching this out of curiosity. And there's no way of convincing these people if they're really stuck in their ways. You can't convince someone who thinks they know everything to be known that there is something else that they don't know of, because nobody goes looking for the answers to questions that they think they already know the answers to, which is a common thing that Ken Weeder says. Yet again, I'm not disrespecting him, so to speak. I'm just saying that he's not right on everything, and nobody will be right on everything to begin with, alright? I'll be wrong about something here, and I'm still fixing my PDF because it's not correct in everything that I've tried to convey. Though there's a nature of adequacy that I'm fine with, even if I just die right now. It's good enough for what I have sought out to seek after. So yeah, again, I disagree with the context of claiming that space and time are unreal when speed is more unreal. Alright? Even the speed of light is more unreal than time and space, because speed is a composite of space and time, or this space in terms of distance derived from using some kind of material, as well as using that material in motion to exegete a sort of distance as the means to derive a time, which again, distance over time derives the speed, and velocity is the change of displacement, which displacement again is more of a term between two or not between, but more like a composite of two frames of references as the means to detecting change of those two frames of references, with the privileged point of reference to derive positive or negative change in the system. Alright? If this made sense to you now, congratulations, you understand my my grievances here. And here's my email, and that's it. Hope you like this. Like, subscribe, whatever. Don't subscribe if you don't like it. Downvote this video if you hate it. I don't care anyways. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.